Hi guys, Claudia Boleyn here. This is going to be brief. I'm sorry my videos are kind of quite, short at this time because I'm getting out of here. I'm going to my grandma and granddad's. That hair is going to annoy me throughout this whole video. I just know it is. Okay. This is a really brief one because this is a subject I want to get into in some detail and I want to research. But I've been doing my usual, press roundup kind of thing with the magazines, and a lot of it has become quite repetitive. So you're also seeing less Harry and Meghan. So this week there are only two magazines I've seen with them on the front. So very, very, very briefly, I'll just read them to you. We won't get into it in any real depth, it's the same old thing. So we've got Woman magazine, Harry and Meghan, drugs, hypocrisy and lies in quotation marks, and why there's no going back. This is by our old friend Emily Andrews, who at some point I will research because I didn't know she existed until I started studying these kind of articles about Meghan and Harry, and then I realised she's probably writing quite a big percentage of them. And the basis of that is quite obviously, she's angry about the Gabor Mate therapy interview that Harry did, which I've already spoken about. I've done a video about it on the channel because I actually paid for a ticket because Dr. Gabor Mate is I really respect him and I admire his work. So they're leading with the big drugs and hypocrisy thing, and I feel like I don't want to keep going over the same ground with you guys, but they're keeping that up. It is awful because if we understand the cycle of abuse, we understand Darvo. You know, Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this a lot. He does a lot of work with addictions, people with substance abuse issues. You don't have to be an addict, of course, to have issues with substance abuse or to abuse different substances, but often it's a horrible cycle because people can end up using those substances because they don't have support, because they have a lot of trauma or difficult histories and no outlet to express that. So you often see people kind of slipping through the net, especially I think in teenage years. You see that, it's a way that certain people try and cope with things. They kind of try and self-medicate or take themselves out of their mind, or they chase the kind of rush of it, and it's often coming from trauma. So it's really, I feel like the way we talk about addiction and people who misuse substances or have issues with that is really wrong still, because we're looking at it all wrong. We're still coming at it in 2023. Some people are coming at it in a sense that, oh, they're bad, awful people doing that, and I have no interest in that. It's like if you see a person on the street, a homeless person, I don't know if homeless person is the correct terminology, I'm so sorry if it's not, and then you get chatting to them, that they all talk about, they've had struggles with different things. Not always, you get all sorts of different people that you meet. Unfortunately, in the UK we have a lot of homelessness, and it's incredibly depressing. And we also have these horrible this horrible mentality here that don't give to homeless people because they're addicts or they're this or they're that. And I just kind of feel like if a person's in need, then if you've got something to spare to help them out, then why would you not? Honestly, I just don't agree with that sort of judgment. Any one of us could become homeless or in that position at any time. People don't like to think about that, but it's true. This is not about that, but the moment we start, I get really suspicious when people do the whole, oh look, drugs, this person's a terrible person, and it's like, are they causing harm? Who are they causing harm to? Is it to themselves? Is it to other people? Like, every situation is different, but there's no empathy in it. And often people who are abused or gone through trauma, veterans who have PTSD might fall into that kind of thing to cope, and then they are villainized again, even though they're in a terribly vulnerable situation, and just dismissed. I don't like that perspective at all. I do not like that worldview. So that's what they're trying to do with Harry. And actually it actually says here, how can Harry be any sort of role model? And it's just interesting to me. I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, but I would say, Harry is not trying to be a role model. Like, he's not out there people talking about their trauma and their issues and the way they've coped with things doesn't mean that you're trying to be a role model. Like, he's not said that. Second of all, it goes with this whole idea, doesn't it? They're trying to now paint Harry as dangerous, which is kind of hilarious because they've spent a really long time just trying to make him some weak puppet of Meghan. But now they've got a problem because they haven't managed to break him down enough. He's quite tough. So now they're changing it. So don't be surprised if you continue to see that. There was an Angela Levin thing I saw on GB News, which I have to talk about on here when I've got time, where she actually suggested that Harry was a danger around children. And she just came out and said that, that's how far this stuff has gone. So they are now monstering Harry into this awful person, and oh no, like drugs and trauma. And it's like, yeah, the reality of trauma and abuse is that your coping mechanisms are not always healthy, and you will not be a perfect victim. I worry about that so much because I know that people out there who have gone through trauma and abuse, there will be less than 1% of them who would fit the perfect victim stereotype, and even they would be told they're not, you know, they're not entitled to being a victim by certain people. I just hate the whole idea that it's like, doesn't matter that he's talking about trauma and abuse, what really matters is that we shouldn't listen to him because he's not perfect as a victim. That's not how I want us to be dealing with abuse. So that's a thing. Drugs, hypocrisy and varying recollections. It is interesting with the whole role model thing because they ask about Harry being open about his life and talking in a professional setting with a professional about different things in his life. They're like, oh, he's not a good role model. What about William being a good role model? Like, not like I'm not sure attacking your little brother like that is a good role model. I'm not sure, you know, allowing racism to happen on your watch, right, and not doing anything and actually benefiting from it. I don't know if that makes someone a good role model, frankly. I mean, is Charles a good role model? You know, the way that Diana was treated by Charles and Camilla, I think we can all agree, whether or I don't know, actually. I don't know if Charles and Camilla fans kind of erased that part of history. You know, I know it was a difficult situation for everyone involved because Charles was in some ways, you know, very pressured by the system. But that's not role model material, is it? You know, the focus is just on Harry. And I would say that Harry is actually coming out with things that make me feel quite reassured about parenting. You know, the fact he talks about, you know, breaking cycles and understanding generational trauma makes me feel more comfortable. Like, I don't know any of these people and I don't want to get into that situation of, you know, behind closed doors, any of them could be awful people. You know, we just don't know because, you know, we can't assess that. But based on what we've seen and what's been said, I would say that I think the environment that his kids are growing up in is healthy. This is going to bring me to the next thing. You know, I was going to say something else, but this has just led on so brilliantly. Okay, so another article I saw. This was like, I think it was just like last week. There's only a tiny amount of time between them. So remember the implication there is that Harry is like a dangerous, bad person. We've got Angela Levin talking about how, oh, he's dangerous to your kids. And watch how they do that, right? Any minority people don't like, they suddenly transform them into a danger to children. They did it to gay people, right? I don't know. I mean, I wasn't necessarily around when they were doing that, but I know because I've researched it. Like, they do it to gay people. They're doing it to drag queens. They're doing it to trans people. I'm not saying that individual people aren't worrisome, you know, and bad, but they like to put that on a whole group. They like to create that kind of panic. But what I saw was the Bella magazine, right? And it said Kate's fear for George. And this interested me because I always get very, very uncomfortable when the focus is on any of the children. Because the children did not ask. In a royal system, I will just come out and say it. I will make a proper video about this. It is an abusive system and those children are enduring abuse. I'm not saying that their parents are abusing them, but the system that they are in is abusing those children. And we have absolutely no idea what effect that's going to have on their self-esteem, their self-image, like their psyche going forward. We don't know what that means. But being born as a mascot and having grown adults depending on you, like, please think about George. I will make a proper video for this. And actually think about William and Charles too in this. That is too much for a child. How is just some random child supposed to cope with the fact that all these adults are expecting them to kind of work their way into this job on which they're told, you know, tourism hinges and patriotism hinges, it's very important. They are not allowed to have any political opinions, you know, they are basically just put through the pipeline. They're also punished for showing emotion, you know, they have to have everything public facing taken away from them. It's a grooming and indoctrination process. Those children in the system are being groomed, they are being indoctrinated, and it's child abuse. I'm just going to say that. I'm just going to say that. I know it's very complicated because it's a system that runs, and it's not just the family, it's the firm. You know, I think the family, I can't comment on Kate and William and their relationship with their children. From what I've seen, they love their children very much. You know, it's very, very complicated, these things. But I was interested. Fears for George. So they've got George on the front and they're bringing him into this. The Princess of Wales doesn't want her eldest overwhelmed with his new role. So they talk about how his role is going to be low-key, how they basically paint Kate in a positive light for the things that they wouldn't like if Meghan did it. You know, so the idea that she's a protective mother of her children, they really go for that. You know, they act like Kate's this, like, gentle person, but when it comes to her kids, you know, she's really angry and she does the early years work because they're making her, you know, the propaganda with Kate is making her the nation's mother. But apparently they are worried. This is according to experts. Who knows at this point? Like, I'm still trying to figure out this whole, it's so corrupt, you know. I'm trying to figure out the experts thing, and it's just awful. But they've apparently said that they're worried about his part in the coronation, and they don't want to subject him to overwhelming scrutiny. You know, they're very keen for him not to be overwhelmed by that stuff because of the anxiety, which is very normal. But I would put it like this: I think it's very worrying and disturbing that Harry and Meghan are often portrayed as not good parents, like in terms of their parenting is criticised. And to be honest, none of us even know behind closed doors, and that's the truth. None of us know about anyone, unless we're in the home, what someone is actually like as a parent and what they're like to their children. But I think we can agree that Harry is being presented as dangerous, Meghan is being presented as hyper ambitious, you know, no time for her kids, etc. They're just soulless brands. Whereas Kate is being shown as the grandmother, and I'm not really sure what they're doing with William. I feel like in old, like, British custom and British tradition, he can kind of get away with being a bit more of a distant dad figure. I mean, I'm not saying he's that in private, but they don't really push for William and the kids in, you know, in the tabloids and stuff, because they don't need to. You know, that's not a stereotype they need to play into. Obviously, in a situation where things are so sexist, things are going to focus more on Kate, Camilla, Meghan, and now Harry, because if you stand with oppressed people, they come for you too. But it says here that they want to protect him, you know, in quotes. They want to protect George from the expectations on him. And there's a part here which just chills me. And I sometimes feel like I'm going mad because I've said this for years and people have looked at me like I'm insane. I think what is happening to those 3 children is abuse. And I don't know why people can't recognise that. Because think about it like this: if it was your child in your family, this is a system where they are always public facing. They are told what they're going to be and who they're going to be. But worse than that, they are also taught not to show emotion, not to show the wrong emotion, not to speak politically or to be political. You are simultaneously making them very entitled. You know, you're better than everyone else, but you are also, your role is a life of service. That grooming and that indoctrination, you know, the Queen, it's a tragic story. I know there's other stuff about her being in charge of an imperialist and a colonialist project, I get that. But in terms of just the people, the story of Elizabeth Windsor is not something to be celebrated. It is a tragedy of, you know, we don't know what could have been otherwise for her. You know, she was so successful because she sacrificed her humanity, essentially, right? For her whole life. And we applaud that in Britain for some reason, because obviously in Britain we don't want to, you know, be supporting people that are thinking outside of the box or whistleblowers, etc. You know, we want to discourage people from that, and that's why we have the keep calm, carry on thing here in Britain. We attach pride and goodness to being silent and not having opinions and not rocking the boat, and that there's a reason for that. It's really obvious. We're kind of indoctrinated into it, but essentially George has been groomed into a role that he doesn't get to choose, and a role that if he wants to step away from, it's going to be very difficult for him. You know, people will say, oh, he's got the option of stepping away. I don't think a child could be able to handle the stress of thinking, what will happen if I step away? Because what they're doing to Harry is basically showing him what happens when you step away, right? I know Edward VIII, or can we call him Edward VIII? But, you know, Edward, not a great guy. But if we just look at the fact that he abdicated and the stories around that, you know, he let people down, he wasn't good enough, he was kind of laughed at, you know, we don't want you, you've turned against Britain, etc. And we're still seeing that now. You know, so in some ways, I will say this, William and Kate letting that happen to Harry and Meghan is helping with the abuse of their children, if their children in the future ever want to get out. Because it's a threat to the children. It's like children who grow up in a cult. You are scared to leave because you know that you're safe in the group and you don't want to make people angry with you and you want to people please, and especially if you're in their position, I would imagine you are very concerned with image. Those little kids have had to think about everything, because anything they do wrong, any tantrum in public, like let's talk about very briefly the Louis incident. I'll be honest with you, I do have some worrying thoughts about that incident. I'm not an expert. I think possibly that's a child in extremely high stress, acting up for whatever reason, and I have thoughts on it, which, you know, I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to say what they are, but, you know, the idea that those children are so front facing, right? There's a part in this article which says that what everyone really wants is they'll want the money shot, which is for all 3 of the children in their finery. Grown adults will be waiting for the 3 children. Like, there's an expectation on the children. What if one of the children gets nervous? You know, like, my brother was a really shy child. He'd get really upset sometimes when he had to, like, socialise and stuff like that when he was younger. Like, what if one of the children feels too nervous to do it? I used to get like that just in, like, normal situations. You know, I have an anxiety disorder and a trauma history. But, you know, the high stress on a kid, knowing that they all need that from you. They don't actually care about you as a person, but they need that picture of you in all your finery. Like, children, imagine the children in those uncomfortable whatever they're going to be put in, thinking, why is this happening? It's like the children of influencers who are now made to perform. Children are not there to perform. The whole point of having children, I don't care, royal family or not, the point of having a child is so that you can let that child grow into who they're going to be, flourish, make them feel safe, let them explore, let them become a full, kind, happy human being, and let them explore who they are. You don't tell children who they are or who they're going to be. Beyond kindness, you do not tell children that. That is abusive, and it's too much stress to put on a child. We would be able to see that in any other situation. Because we have a situation with George. You know, it's all very well saying, oh, we don't want the spotlight on him. The system itself is abusing that boy. Because if he steps away, he is going to be seen as anti-Britain, as a traitor. People will mock him. It's like, I feel this very strongly because I'm LGBT. We put an expectation on people. It's like when LGBT people have to come out and it feels embarrassing because it's like you have to opt out of something that's already been thrust upon you. You know, it's like people just assume you're something and then they often get offended or angry if you have to inform them that actually that's not you. It puts it on you rather than the society that tells you who you are. You then have to step back and say, actually, I'm not sure that is me. And it's awkward and it's like you're apologetic. You're like, I'm sorry, you know, that actually isn't me. And it's difficult. Imagine how much difficult that is if you are the heir to the throne. The added thing here is that, you know, think about when Edward abdicated. You know, that idea that how could he do that? You know, it thrust Elizabeth into the limelight and, you know, his poor brother. So George now as a big brother, if he wants to get out of that system, has to then subject his little sister to being the person that burden falls on, taking away her freedom. That is not acceptable for a child. And the grown adults who support this system, I'm sorry, it's sick. It's really, really sick. In this article, it says here, I don't think, this is Katie, who's some expert, I don't know who she is, I'll put it on the screen. I don't think William and Kate have made a big thing of saying to George, one day you'll be king. They want to protect him from that moment, so it's an idea that's being introduced to him gradually. That kind of sounds like the system is grooming George, doesn't it? It's alright, we're just going to slowly tell you that you're not allowed to be a human being and an individual and you're actually a human mascot. Like, we're just going to slowly introduce that to you. But that's fine, because, you know, we're all about mental health and early years development. There's nothing wrong here. This isn't too stressful for a child to deal with at all. This isn't going to make the child either completely implode or just become, like, the most arrogant, dangerous person ever. Like, that's not going to go wrong, is it? I guess it's just very, very... the hypocrisy of it really makes me angry. The hypocrisy of a lot of it. Because you've got Harry and Meghan being smeared like they're bad parents when they dedicate a lot of time to parenting, right? They're actively thinking about breaking the systems. How can their children, you know, be happy and have mental health support, etc. Part of that is dismantling your own stuff, right? And your own history if it's been trauma-based, because you don't want to pass it on, which Harry's doing. Yet nobody ever says anything about the fact that William and Kate are allowing their children to be groomed into the system. And here's the thing, I don't know if in the modern day, I get really, really confused by this, because I feel like when it came to Diana and the boys, it was like a turning point, wasn't it? I know Diana started she was very young when she was with Charles, and then she started becoming protective of the children, and she started to become very disturbed by it. And then she kind of thought, I want to get out, but it was really, really sinister, because as her children were like heirs, you know, in the succession, the crown had the power to take her children from her, to take charge of her children. So she couldn't get them out, and it's a very complicated situation. But you cannot be interested in early childhood and mental health, right? If you're going to put your child through that. All of those children. You know, like Harry says, the other two, they're going to be tabloid fodder, aren't they? Those children have to perform. It's not right that a child just being seen at an event might end up on the papers being used to, like, push fascism, right? They're not consenting to that. They're not consenting to being mascots. There is no questioning of the parenting of William and Kate. I'm not saying it's entirely their fault. The system is messed up. And William himself has gone through the messed up system. But I just cannot quite believe that they are presenting Harry and Meghan as these dangerous individuals towards children, when we are from the same people who worship a system which grooms and indoctrinates children into roles that they have no choice in and they have to opt out of. And if they opt out of it, they're letting everyone down. You know, they've let all those years of history, you know, there's an official process. You have to officially resign. You know, the abdication process is not simple. All that on a child. Children don't know what they want to do or who they are. Like, they need time to think about those things. They are steamrolling George into that. And it'll be too late, right? By the time he gets the chance to abdicate. Like, how is that right? It is not right. And the conditioning of George is also, obviously, like I've said, the monstering of Harry, basically. You know, he's kind of stepped away, wanted to be kind of part of it, but more distant. But they've made it very clear to George that that's not a possibility. You're all in or all out. So rather than leaning into the Harry thing, think about how Kate and William, if they want to be monarchists still, think about how Kate and William as monarchists could make things easier for their children. The answer would have been to not let Harry be monstered and leave it as the option that, say George does want to step away from it. It's okay, you don't have to lose everything, you don't have to be humiliated, you know, we can work this out. They're not modelling that, so that's going to be terrifying for those children, isn't it? Absolutely terrifying, because who's going to want to be treated like their Uncle Harry? You know, they're going to be seeing that and thinking, oh my gosh, you know, that's horrifying. I don't want that. It's just sick. Anyway, that's my video for today. I was going to do like a papers roundup thing, but they're all so similar. You know, the usual reassurances. William and Kate are doing really well. They're really great. It's like, who asked? That sounds suspicious. What are you covering up? Nobody asked. It's all really dodgy. Anyway, love you loads. I've got to get out of here. I'll see you really soon. All right, love you. Bye.